You've had the same argument 3 times this month. Different person, different words, same feeling in your chest. You told yourself it wouldn't happen again. But it did. And somewhere in the back of your mind, there's a question you don't want to ask. What if you don't actually know why you do what you do? Most people believe they understand themselves. They can tell you what they like, what they don't, what makes them angry, what they want. They've lived with themselves their entire lives. Of course they know, but knowing about yourself is not the same as knowing yourself. You can describe your reactions without understanding them. You can recognize a pattern without ever asking where it came from. And most people never ask, not because they're incapable, but because the question itself is uncomfortable. Think about the last time you got defensive. Someone said something. You reacted. Maybe you raised your voice. Maybe you shut down. Maybe you justified yourself immediately. It felt automatic, like the reaction wasn't a choice, it just happened. And afterward, you probably explained it. They shouldn't have said that. Anyone would have reacted that way. I was just being honest. But what if the explanation came after the feeling? What if your mind built the reason to match the reaction? Most people live like this, reacting, then explaining, then moving on. They never stop to ask what the reaction was protecting. There's a difference between thinking about yourself and actually observing yourself. Thinking about yourself is easy. You do it all the time. You replay conversations. You imagine what you should have said. You remind yourself of who you are and who you're not. But that's narration. That's the voice in your head describing the character you believe yourself to be. Observation is different. Observation asks, why did I need to say that? Why does this bother me so much? What am I actually afraid of? And most people avoid those questions because the answers might not match the story. We defend ourselves from self-knowledge in ways we don't even notice. Busyness is one of them. If you're always moving, always doing, always consuming, there's no space to think. And if there's no space to think, there's no chance of noticing what you've been avoiding. Distraction works the same way. Scrolling, watching, listening to something, anything. So the silence doesn't settle in. Because silence has a way of surfacing what you've been ignoring. And most people would rather stay distracted than sit with that discomfort. Then there's identity. The version of yourself you've agreed to be. You know the one. I'm the reliable one. I'm the logical one. I'm the one who doesn't care what people think. It's a container, a set of traits you've claimed, a role you've accepted. And once you've accepted it, anything that doesn't fit becomes a threat. If you're the calm one, you can't admit you're anxious. If you're the strong one, you can't acknowledge you're tired. So instead of questioning the identity, you protect it. You edit yourself to match the story. And after a while, you forget you're editing. Here's the thing most people don't realize. Certainty is a defense mechanism. When you're certain about something, about who you are, what you believe, why things happened, you stop looking. Certainty feels like clarity, but often it's just the end of curiosity. People cling to certainty because uncertainty feels dangerous. If you don't know why you feel the way you do, if you don't know what you actually want, if you can't explain your own behavior, then who are you? So the mind offers an answer, a clean one, a simple one. I'm just like this. This is who I've always been. And once you accept that answer, the question disappears. But the pattern doesn't. Most people confuse repetition with truth. They've told themselves the same story so many times it feels like fact. I don't trust people because I've been hurt before. I need control because the world is chaotic. I'm fine. I'm always fine. And maybe there's some truth in those statements. But they're also explanations. Narratives your mind constructed to make sense of something deeper, something you haven't looked at yet. Because looking means questioning. And questioning means you might have been wrong. Not about the facts, but about what the facts mean. Think about the last time you were wrong about something that mattered. Not a small mistake. Something bigger. A belief you held. A judgment you made. A way you saw yourself or someone else. And then you realized you were wrong. What did that feel like? For most people, it doesn't feel like relief. It feels like loss. Because if you were wrong about that, What else might you be wrong about? And if you start pulling that thread, where does it end? So most people don't pull it. They adjust, they rationalize, they move the boundary just enough to accommodate the new information without dismantling the structure. And they call that growth. But real understanding doesn't protect the structure. It questions it. It asks, why do I need to be right about this? What happens if I'm not? And that's where most people stop. Because the answer is uncomfortable. What happens if you're not right is that you have to sit with uncertainty. You have to admit you don't know. And if you don't know yourself as well as you thought you did, then what have you been doing all this time? There's a reason people avoid stillness. When you're still, actually still, not just sitting quietly while your mind runs, things surface. Feelings you've been outrunning, thoughts you've been drowning out, patterns you've been too distracted to notice. And once they surface, you can't unsee them. Most people sense this. They know on some level that if they stopped moving, something would catch up. So they don't stop. They stay busy. They stay stimulated. They stay just distracted enough to avoid the question underneath everything. What am I actually doing? And why? Here's what makes this difficult. You can't see the pattern from inside it. If you've been reacting the same way for years, it doesn't feel like a reaction anymore. It feels like reality. If you've been avoiding the same thing for years, you stop noticing you're avoiding it. It just becomes part of the landscape. And the longer it goes on, the harder it is to see. Because your mind adapts. It normalizes. It justifies. It creates a version of the story where everything makes sense. And you live in that version until something breaks it. Most people wait for the break, the loss, the failure, the moment when the story stops working. And then, for a brief window, they see it. They see the pattern, the avoidance, the automation. But even then, most people don't stay with it. They grieve, they adjust, they rebuild. And the new story looks different, but the mechanism underneath stays the same. Because understanding yourself isn't a revelation you have once. It's a practice. A continuous, uncomfortable practice of noticing what you'd rather not notice. And most people aren't willing to do that. Not because they're weak, but because it's relentless. Carl Jung said something once. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Most people live this way. They experience their lives as something that happens to them. They react, they cope, they adapt, and they call it living. But underneath there's a question they never ask. What am I not seeing? Not about the world, about themselves. You don't have to answer that question. You can live an entire life without asking it. Most people do. They build careers, relationships, identities. They experience joy and pain and everything in between. And they do it all without ever truly understanding why they do what they do. There's no judgment in that. But there's also no escape from the consequences. Because what you don't understand, you repeat. What you don't see, you can't change. And what you refuse to question becomes the boundary of your life. So here's the question, not for later, not as something to think about and forget. Right now. What are you avoiding noticing about yourself? Not what you should notice, what you're choosing not to see. What reaction keeps showing up that you've stopped questioning? What story have you told yourself so many times you've forgotten it's just a story? What would you have to admit if you stopped defending and just observed? You don't have to answer. But the question doesn't go away.